Hi, so I'm coming on here with something I just realized. Um, I think that I had a demonic contract, and it's strange to say that I just realized this, but it disguised itself as something completely different. So, basically, about is it 15 years ago now? I was reading Harry Potter, and that should have been my first hint, honestly. But I'm only now just realizing what all of this is about. And yeah, I was reading it, and I was particularly impressed by the character of Hermione, and I just wanted to be like her. And I think that's all I said. I was in a sort of like trance, state already, as far as my consciousness goes. And I just said, like, I wish I could be like her, or I wish I could be more like this and that. I don't remember exactly. But the next day, I woke up and I was a completely different person. And I remember it so vividly. Not just because it was such a stark contrast between who I was the previous day and the next day, but because it actually went on for an entire year. I woke up and it was like someone else was just driving my body, and it was great. Like, I didn't have to worry about stuff anymore. Everything just happened on its own, and everything happened so perfectly. That's why I never questioned this, because my life went from like pretty miserable to amazing, literally overnight. And I just remember feeling so grateful for this. It was essentially like the best year of my life. But after that year, it was like there was just a complete breakdown in the contract, I guess. And it made me really depressed. And I just needed to find answers. And the first place I went to was the New Age. I read A New Earth. Yeah, that book. And that was my introduction to everything spiritual and esoteric. And all the while I'm thinking like this is a positive thing. I just lost it somehow. And the thing is, like, when I say that this was an amazing year, there are no words to like the relief that I experienced from living as a person to suddenly just like taking the back seat. I remember that. I remember being in the background of my mind and just watching everything unfold. And it's funny because one of the few pictures I have from this year is of me on Halloween in school, dressed as a devil. And I mean, you could say that that's just a coincidence. I've never dressed as a devil any other year, before or since. Um, and I'm discovering lately that there really isn't such a thing as coincidence either. And I remember not eating during that year. Like, I would eat very small portions and be full and have so much energy. But I can obviously see from that picture that I was becoming emaciated. But it didn't matter. I had so much, like, energy coming from somewhere. And my mind is going like a million miles an hour because I'm trying to fit this into so many things. But basically, the the reason I realized this yesterday, that it probably was a demonic contract, was because I was watching a video on this, and it just clicked somehow in my mind that, oh, that's obviously what that was. I was watching a video about actors and how they actually are possessed when they're acting, at least if they're acting well, Oscar worthy, method acting, and they admit this fully themselves. And I just, for somehow it clicked. I don't know why. But one particularly interesting case is obviously Heath Ledger's The Joker. And I remember watching The Dark Knight in the cinema, and cognitively, like intellectually, logically, knowing that, oh, this is like the film of the year that I'm watching right now, but emotionally screaming on the inside to just get out of that place. I felt so awful watching that film, and I couldn't pinpoint why. I just left feeling traumatized, like empty, drained, and fearful. And I had this like feeling of something like being there after watching it, and having nightmares, and just feeling like that was a bad decision. And this was long before, like, this is, if you think about it, this is an old movie now, just long before I knew about any of this. And yeah, it turns out that his whole process of getting into that role was locking himself in a hotel room for 4 months and sleeping 2 hours a day, and basically going crazy, starting to talk with himself. And that's how he was on set, like, the whole time. So clearly he invoked something, and the video even mentioned the entity. I can't remember who it is now, but, or what it is, but it was clear to me on a subconscious level that I should not be watching this. There's so much going on. I watched another video by the same creator about, actually they didn't really mention anything important, but it was about K-pop, and it just clicked in my head, like, how, because I've been to these concerts, how do they get the energy? And I know that they say that they get it from the audience because, we cheer them on so much. But I saw this with my own eyes. I mean, we're talking 3 hours straight of the most grueling choreography, and the singing was flawless. It really was otherworldly. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video, that I left one of those concerts feeling like this was wrong. Like, after The Dark Knight, I felt that it was sinister, and I couldn't understand how I was feeling that way afterwards, because during the whole show I was like in ecstasy. I mean, I was ecstatic. And I think that should have told me something already. But yeah, I don't think they're getting their energy from the audience, because that really was superhuman. It should not be possible. Yeah, the fact that I felt that way, it's almost like my intuition has always been on point. I just could never make sense of it, and I never really listened to it, because I mean, even before certain things would happen, I would obviously get a bad feeling, and I would just do them anyway, because that doesn't really make sense, like, in the context of a modern world. Like, why wouldn't I do that? But something within me was telling me, don't. And the other reason why I'm I think I'm only realizing this now about my 1 year demonic contract, is the fact that I now have the Holy Spirit living in me, and I am with God. And so the experience of that year compared to how I feel now, it really, really gives the impression of like a knockoff effect. And I'm having that with a lot of things, like the Kundalini versus the Holy Spirit, and just a whole bunch of experiences that you would have in the New Age versus the real deal. You can just see that, oh, that's the knockoff version of this. So yeah, it took me about 15 years for it to click, but it finally did. And the best year of my life, quote, was unfortunately a very sinister start to a whole spiral into delusion. So yeah, I hope someone who is like already in that phase might hear this, but I think more likely this will be heard and understood by people who've already been through it, because it's so hard to understand that might be the case whilst you're in it, because it just feels so good. And I think that, to circle back to all of this celebrity stuff I've been mentioning, I think that is one of the main methods of recruitment or enticement or just appeal that the enemy has when it comes to celebrity. And yeah, because I mean, as regular people finding out about all of these, let's say, societies and agreements and like just all the secrecy, it seems a bit far off, at least at first. But it makes a lot more sense when you've had that experience, because it's obvious that that's a force for good. Like when you're in it, it just feels that way. It feels so good. It feels so good to you, and you want other people to have that. So yeah, just yet another trick by the enemy that happens to work really well. So I wouldn't necessarily throw these people under the bus. Nobody's beyond redemption. And I do not think that most of them are aware of what they're doing. Actually, it's impossible for any of them to be fully aware, because if they knew what awaits them and the plan that their so-called God has for them and how he really feels about them, there's just no way that they would still be in that. I mean, they would literally risk their lives to get out of it. So yeah, that is my story, and some tangents relating to demonic contracts. And yeah, I'll come back on if I realize something else. I'm sure I will. Yeah, I'll make more videos regarding that. Thanks for listening. Bye.